Welcome to Discover Creative Careers Week at ARU. My name's Sarah and I'm the Marketing Manager for the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences. We're here today to talk careers in acting with Mateo Oxley. Mateo and I will be discussing how Mateo became an actor and he'll be sharing insider knowledge with you. As I say, the session's being recorded. If you do have any questions, you can type in the chat if you've got the chat function open whilst we are having a conversation, and that's fine. I can pick those up with Mateo as we go along. Otherwise, I can come to your questions at the end, or you can post them at the end, or as I say, you can turn on your microphone and ask Mateo any questions that you have. So, Mateo, let's get started. So, yeah, if you could just tell us a little bit about your first steps into acting, how it all happened for you, it'd be really great to hear that.
Yeah, sure. So I think like a lot of people, I started when I was quite young doing local amateur dramatics. I had a really lovely little group in a little town that I grew up in Norfolk, and it was like one big family really. So I was initially enrolled into that amateur dramatics club because I was such a painfully shy child.
Oh, really? Okay.
I had a real thing. I couldn't even answer the house phone, or if if one of my like mum or dad's friends spoke to me, I was just so painfully shy.
Wow,
So so it started off as just a bit of an opportunity to bring me out of myself, and it took a while. I remember they put on a little production of Peter Pan and asked if I would play one of the boys, Michael, the youngest in Peter Pan.
okay.
And I was so terrified at the idea of being on stage. I said no, and it took a couple of years for me to kind of build up confidence. But then, you get the bug, and it's like community theatre is so important, I think, when you're young, just to kind of build up like a sense of community and play. And I was so scared of doing any kind of drama in school, but it felt a little bit different with this amateur dramatics. I was like a cute chubby kid, so I would get quite a lot of attention. I was very well looked after, but that was my first kind of few steps in.
Oh, that's really interesting. And do you find in a way that there's a sense of community in acting now, and how does what you do now differ from how it was then, if that makes sense, in terms of the way that you feel about it? And do you still get nervous when you audition, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've been thinking about this recently, actually, because I saw a couple of old photos popped up on Facebook, and a lot of the people that I was acting with at the amateur dramatics group were definitely good enough to have turned professional. It's really interesting. These were people who were working, like accounting jobs, or they were working in like a local, like butchers. We had everyone from the community kind of like mucking in to create this play, and they were very talented. So there is a similar sense of community, I think, in the professional world. And I suppose what's different is that with every project you do, you sort of collect another family.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It can be quite heartbreaking if you've spent 6 months with a company of people, and then suddenly the job finishes and you all go your separate ways. So I suppose starting acting when I was young in a sort of community sense gave me that sense of familiarity with people outside of my family, and talking and performing in front of adults. It was a real exercise in confidence with me. As far as auditions go, I'm still very nervous when I audition.
That's interesting.
It always blows my mind when you hear actors say, "Oh, I love it," or like, "Yeah, no, I can, I take it all in my stride nowadays with auditioning," because I think most actors still get incredibly nervous, because you care about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So based on what you said about how it took you a while to build up your confidence as a young person, what was the moment when you thought, actually, I want to do this is something that I really want to pursue? Was there a sort of light bulb moment for you, or?
There were I think there were a few, really. So as I say, interestingly, I didn't do any kind of drama or performing arts at school. We didn't have a very well funded drama department. In fact, it didn't actually run. It didn't run at my sixth form as an option for A levels. nor did music. So I had to get my sort of music qualifications outside of school and my drama sort of education outside of school. And I ended up studying music at ARU. So I had quite an unconventional route into it. But I think it was when I was in sixth form and my sort of head of careers teacher had noted that I, by this point, was quite a good public speaker. And she had said, you know, have you ever thought about maybe considering the arts? But at that point, I didn't have a clue what a drama school was, or even what a drama university course looked like. So she took me into the prospectus room and we kind of rifled through a few prospectuses. And I mean, I couldn't believe that like you could do a course where you would do like a whole afternoon of Shakespeare and then, you know, learn accents and do dance. It just didn't feel like that was possible before. But then I went to my school was very hot on like science and technology. So I wasn't necessarily in the environment where I could have explored those things before. But yeah, the light bulb moment was really in the prospectus room when I was looking through the syllabus. And I thought, well, these are all things that I could definitely turn my hand to.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. And one of the reasons that we're doing this whole week about creative careers is that, as you say, sometimes people go to schools where they don't have these opportunities, and it is an issue in terms of, you know, the value of art subjects. And that's what we're really here to talk about. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about people that you did amateur dramatics with, you know, the accountants or the butchers, for example, because it might have been that actually they could have been professional actors, but for whatever reason, they didn't think that it was viable for them. And, you know, that's why we're here today, to talk about people, to talk to people so they can understand your route, and that it is something that you can kind of pursue. And potentially be a lot happier than being a butcher or an accountant.
Well, precisely, yeah.
Okay, so at what point did you? I mean, I don't know if there is something that makes you a professional actor, but at what point was it for you that you became a professional actor and sort of considered yourself a professional actor?
Well, I suppose you know, traditionally your first professional credit is deemed as your gateway into the industry. But really, I think it's just a mental adjustment. Like as I told you, I studied music, so I'm a singer as well, and I write on the side. And similar to acting, like it's a mental adjustment where you just kind of own that identity and you say, this is what I am and this is what I'm going to be. And that really helps, because I think in such a varied, interesting, and difficult career as acting, there is this assumption that anyone and everyone can do it, which I'm sort of not entirely convinced by, actually. And that's not to dissuade anyone. It's just I do think that you have to cultivate certain qualities to do it. And sometimes I think that attitude of, oh, anyone can do it, sort of does the industry a disservice, because it's it's a lot of hard work. And events like this are great because hopefully I can give a little bit of insight into actually what it's like. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about acting and kind of what that entails, but hopefully we can unpack a bit of that.
Yeah, thanks. And one question I did want to ask you, because the sort of the stereotype is the Hollywood actress working as a waitress. So I wanted to know, do you do other work as well alongside your acting work?
Yeah, I've done loads. I've been a waiter in restaurants, and for years I was a teaching assistant in schools. I think I worked in 32 primary schools across London before I finally started doing a bit more work with my music and was able to kind of do less of the side hustles and pay a few bills with my music, which was great, and that was always one of my goals. But yeah, I've done a million jobs, and I think that's very typical of actors, and actually one of the most impressive things about the community of actors for me is that kind of resilience and that ability to just use other skills. And I suppose because first and foremost we're strong communicators, we can actually turn our hand to a lot of different things.
Yes, that's really interesting. And actually, the more and more I look into kind of creative careers, and as I say, we've got a whole suite of events throughout the week, that is very typical of creative careers. That people do their kind of creative career, but they have what we would call a portfolio career. So they do lots of other things as well, and quite often it is sort of teaching, or it might be kind of public speaking, or a whole series of other things. And as you say, I think what we want to try and get across to people is that it's less about thinking about a career as such, a profession, one single identity, like you become a lawyer, or but actually it's about skills, as you say, and actually, actors, creative people do build up resilience. And aside from that, they're creative. And actually, that is one of the skills that is most sought after in a whole range of job opportunities. So it's about kind of thinking broadly about, how you can gain skills. And of course, going to university and getting a degree is part of that kind of picture as well, which I think is important.
Absolutely. I find that really encouraging to hear, actually, because I feel like one of the traps of acting, particularly for young people, is that you can sort of have this singular vision. You want to be an actor so much that you kind of have this, I don't know, this idea that if you're not just doing acting, somehow you're not investing enough into your craft. Whereas actually the secret is, which I feel like people slowly get to know, and I certainly have discovered over the years, is that by having other interests and being quite a dynamic person, not only do you keep yourself financially stable so you can kind of stay in the game, but when you do get to work on a project, you're bringing so much more to it. And that for me was really important. I wanted to go and have a university experience before I then went on to drama school, because I wanted to be in societies and clubs, and I wanted to meet people from like all around the world. And I really had that when I was at Anglia Ruskin in Cambridge. And I feel like I'm a more interesting actor because of those 3 years that I spent like living. And I was from a tiny village in Norfolk. I don't know how much life experience I really had before going off to university. So it's important to note that you don't have to just skip off to drama school straight out of college or sixth form. You don't have to do that.
Thank you. So yes, we've talked a bit about skills, but are there particular qualities that you think you need to cultivate as an actor? We've talked about resilience, and we've talked about, being able to adapt to changing situations. Are there any kind of qualities specifically that you think are useful to have or cultivate?
Yeah, I think above all, I would say curiosity. I feel like I think actors by nature are curious, but the more curious you can be about the world, the better. And again, just bridging from what we were just talking about. So, I know lots of my friends here and stuff, we will try and go to free art exhibitions, or, go to gigs, or read as much literature as we can, watching the latest sort of mini series on TV, and for Walk in the Park, just trying to draw inspiration from kind of every facet of life, really, and keeping that curiosity alive. It was actually Alan Rickman has this amazing speech, which you can find on YouTube, about acting, which the crux of it is that he's saying acting is like 5% of your job. The other 95% is staying like sane, really, and robust. But also he talks a lot about curiosity and, as we say, cultivating other interests, because then you bring so much more to your work. Someone who only ever just like goes to the theater, for example, is not going to be bringing as much as someone that like has worked in 7 other jobs and has had to meet like different people in different sectors, and maybe learn a language. Or I have a friend who's an incredible actor who worked on a construction site for 2 years and then booked a BBC job, and it brings all these different colors into the work that you do. So yeah,
I like that phrase, brings in different colors to the work that you do. That's really good. So what's the best thing about your job?
The best thing about my job, I think that's a very good question. There's lots of great things about it, but you just get to meet every kind of person from every walk of life. And you tend to find, not exclusively, but you tend to find that people in this industry are incredibly open-minded, as opposed to tolerant. They just tend to be very open-minded and just interested in the human condition and, you know, observing those qualities. And it's one of the best things for me is not even being on stage and performing, but being in a rehearsal room with a group of people who are so passionate and enthusiastic about what they're doing. And I think, you know, again, a misconception is that actors sort of, it's like a bit of a part-time job, but I'm telling you now, when you're working on a project and you're passionate about it, you pull overtime. You do far more than office hours, you know, clocking in and out. You kind of never really clock out in some ways. It can be quite immersive. And I love that, I think, is just finding a community of really passionate people. There's not many people, I think, that do this job that kind of punch in and punch out, and that's it. You know, you tend to find people are here because it's so tough. People are here because they really want to be.
Yeah, I mean, it might sound like quite a superficial to say, but would you say that, you know, your work makes you happy or fulfilled? Or
yeah, I think happy is a tricky word, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it's not a bad word, just a tricky word, because I suppose it's so subjective. I would definitely say fulfilling, creatively fulfilling. And, you know, look, inevitably there are times when you're out of work, but as I say, it's sort of then your responsibility as an artist, really, to source inspiration from elsewhere or keep yourself, you know, mentally buoyant, I suppose. And that is half of the work, is really championing yourself to continue, because it can be tough, but everyone's path is not the same. You know, my path will not be the same as everyone else's. So
yeah, I guess from a young person's perspective, someone who's thinking about their future and what decisions to make, you know, it's really difficult, and it's very difficult to make decisions about a future that you can't, you know, you don't know how you will feel at that point in time. And the reason that I mention it is that we come across quite a lot of people who have made perhaps what you might consider a safe choice.
Yeah.
And it's often sometimes because, you know, they've been encouraged to make those choices by teachers or parents.
Yeah.
You know, I do apologise because I always talk about accountants. But, you know, they might have gone down that sort of route, but actually at heart they're creative people. And there's, you know, a tendency for them to do something like that, but then come back and want to retrain, because they, you know, actually have a kind of creative calling, and they, you know, they need that sort of fulfillment. So yeah, that's very interesting. So let's be realistic, you know, really immersive, engaging, you know, fulfilling, but it must be difficult because all jobs are difficult. So what would you say are the worst aspects of your job?
Well, I think, you know, as everybody knows, there is a lot of rejection involved. And I think it, you know, can take a little while to understand that that is not necessarily personal. There is a multitude of reasons why you might not get a part or might not get into a drama school. And, you know, those reasons more often than not are arbitrary. And so it's very difficult to understand, because I suppose as an actor, you don't have appraisals or like
No.
and you know, a consistent salary. Like you're in flux all the time. But, you know, for me, that works. I'm a sort of flexible person like that, and too much structure I kind of have a natural resistance to.
Yeah.
So the rejection is never not tough. I think you just get better at coping with it, and as I say, taking it a little less personally. And, you know, again, you hear this sort of cliche of like the actor having to have a thick skin. Well, again, I would say yes and no. Like, I think I have learned to retain a certain sort of softness, because if I harden myself too much against the difficulties of the industry, then I'm not able to be sensitive or really care about it. And I feel like that kind of dilutes my passion for what I do. So I just kind of, if I don't get a job that I really wanted, I let it pass through. I feel however I'm going to feel about it, but I always will treat myself to like a nice long walk, or I'll go and get like an expensive coffee, or I'll make sure I see a friend on the same day as an audition, just so the entire day isn't defined by that one potential rejection.
Yeah, and just out of interest, so because I'm thinking, well, that's kind of a bit like anyone going for a job interview, you know, you get jobs, you don't get jobs, and it's not always about you, it's about other factors or whatever. But you have to sort of manage your own confidence and things. So how many auditions would you go to? That's the point that I'm making. You probably would go to a lot more auditions than someone would an interview, for example.
Yes, sorry, I didn't explain that. Yes,
Yeah.
you will typically go for a lot more auditions than you would ever go in for interviews. It's a heavily subscribed industry, so the auditions can come thick and fast, and you have to be ready. And I mean, I've just done a script which I had less than 24 hours to turn around for an ITV like crime thriller, and I had to drop everything at the weekend. I didn't see a drop of sunshine.
Oh no.
Unfortunately, I saw it from the window, but yeah, so you've got to be ready to go, and then you can still not get that, so that's quite tough to take. And then there are obviously other points when you won't be getting any auditions, which is a very different problem as well. But I think the hardest part sometimes, despite auditions or whatever, is just justifying it to people who may not be familiar with the industry. I think parents can be very tricky on this, because they love you and they care, and they don't want to see that you're struggling necessarily, but finding the language to articulate what it means to you and why you want to pursue this career without giving them a panic attack is very challenging. And even you go to a party or a friend's birthday or something, even with all the best intentions in the world, there's always that person in the room that's like, oh, you're an actor, oh, how's it going, is it really tough, are you struggling, you must be really poor, I haven't seen you in EastEnders or something. So I would actually say the hardest part is other people.
Yeah. That's interesting. So just to cover some of the logistics in terms of, so I was interested to know how you find out about work, whether you have an agent, and how all that kind of process works.
Yeah, so I went to Anglo Ruskin for 3 years and did my music degree. I then went to a drama school in West London called Arts Ed on a scholarship. And when I graduated from there, in our last term, we had a showcase, and professional agents were invited, and they get in contact if they're interested in taking meetings. So I think I took 6 meetings, and I think 2 weeks later I had decided on an agent. I was then with that agent for 5 years. I then moved to another one for 3 years. And then I've just moved in December to another one. And that's quite common as well, to move around. It's sort of the same thing as applying for a new job in a way, like, relationships change, you change, like your idea of where you want your career to go. But that's kind of how it happened with the agent. And it's quite difficult contacting agents, because everybody would like to be represented. So I was fortunate that I got into a drama school where they could put on a showcase and invite agents. But it is another tricky part of the industry, trying to get someone to reply to one of your emails. They're very, very busy people. But the relationship with an agent is really interesting. It's a strange sort of combination of like a colleague and a friend. You really have to it's a tricky balance, because my first agent took me straight out of drama school and gave me my first job, so there was almost like a maternal relationship there. And I still love her to pieces, even though we've sort of parted ways professionally. And then my next agent was very business. We would never go for a coffee or a drink together. It wasn't. And now my new agent is such a lovely mixture of both, so I can talk to them about the thing I'm watching on Channel 4, or like my cat, as well as sending scripts and stuff. So it's a bit of a mysterious relationship, the actor and the agent. Everyone, everyone thinks Estelle from Friends, Joey's agent, and there is a lot of that as well.
But that's interesting. So I'm interested that you didn't say that having an agent was the point at which you can kind of consider yourself to be a professional actor. But I'm wondering, so are there people? Presumably there are other actors who don't have agents.
Yeah, so just to clarify on that point, I know people who are fantastic actors that aren't represented. And I think there's often a sort of assumption that if you're not represented, you're not very good. And that's just not the case. There's
Okay.
just so many people trying to do this job. People sometimes fall by the wayside in terms of representation. However, Spotlight is the sort of piece of software we have online which advertises acting jobs.
Okay.
And I know it used to be the case that you had to have a professional credit to be granted access to Spotlight. I'm not sure that's the case anymore.
When you say a professional credit, what do you mean by that?
A professional credit whereby you're in paid employment by a theatre or a television or film production company.
Okay, it's like one of those classic catch-22s. Like, how do you get access to jobs if you don't have a credit? It's like work experience.
And it's been heavily scrutinized over the year, and I think that they have changed their admission rules now, which is quite right, because it's not, I don't think it's fair, or it's not equitable at least. So you can still apply for jobs even if you don't have an agent. There are huge benefits to having an agent, because they can look over scripts for you and try and really carve out a path. They will have their own contacts to bring to the business relationship. But I have friends who have been successful without agents and are very good at networking and building opportunities themselves. It's not impossible.
Okay, so when you talked about your agent, you sort of said about carving the path. Is that a sort of route for you as an actor that you two will work on together in terms of your direction and where you want to be working? And
absolutely. So the goal is really to find a collaborative partnership with your agent, and again, that's very tricky. You have to meet people and discover whether you have that same sort of shared vision, I suppose. Like, I feel like I've arrived at that place now. I think I'm 7 years into the industry now, and I've just arrived at the right balance of that relationship with my agent, where it's very much a collaboration, and you're excited to discuss projects together and talk about what might be the next step.
Okay, so just a few questions for you about the type of work that you do. And so one thing is around typecasting. Like, if you've done a certain type of work, how do you then avoid always doing that kind of work? And has that been an issue for you, or?
Yeah, I mean, that can be a tricky one, particularly when you're younger, I think, and you don't have as much experience. You're willing to kind of fling yourself at a lot of projects, which is great, and it's great to have that attitude. You've just got to be a little bit careful in terms of, like any industry being exploited, you have to have sort of safe boundaries in place. I mean, I'm English, but I have Italian and Greek heritage, so I've played a lot of waiters and like all of the cliche stuff, and like swarthy people by the pool. There comes a point when you're like, oh, I'll do it for a little bit and maybe build some experience, but then you're like, I'm more than that, and I'm not very interested in that kind of work. So you just have to have you have to clearly communicate, I suppose, your goals or your ideas for yourself, and not feel pressured into accepting something that doesn't make you comfortable. But the younger you are, the harder that is in a way. You get better as you get a little bit older.
And is that something that your agent typically supports you with? Have you ever felt any pressure to be, oh no, you really must do this kind of commercial, or?
Oh yeah, I think every actor has a kind of horror story about I've been sent in. I mean, I've never booked a commercial ever. Commercials are great because they can, pay your rent for a year sometimes.
Okay,
I never knock a commercial. It's not necessarily the most kind of engaging work, or like, it's not necessarily like the Royal Shakespeare Company, but they can keep you in the industry. And it has saved friends of mine on countless occasions. They've got a yogurt commercial, and that has meant that they can buy some better equipment to film themselves for competitions, or so it's good. But I've never booked a commercial, so clearly I'm not very good at them. But I have had to be my first audition at a commercial, I had to pretend to be obviously eaten by a giant Venus flytrap. And that while spraying my underarms with deodorant, it was totally, so nothing prepares you for that kind of surreal experience.
But that's okay, is it? As you say, you know, something like that, you would be comfortable with that sort of trade-off because it facilitates you doing what you love doing.
Yeah, I just think you just have to, you know, if you don't have an agent, you obviously just have to like kind of think about it deeply. Like, what is this going to enable? Is this going to move me forward, or is this going to move me backwards? Is this going to nourish me in any way? And if you do have an agent, very quickly they'll be able to tell you whether they think it's a good idea. But again, crucially, it's a collaboration. So if they say, I think you should do it, and you really don't feel that you should, you're never forced to go to an audition. You can always say no. And there's great power actually in sometimes placing a boundary and saying, I'm not comfortable doing that, or that's not what I would like to do.
Yeah, interesting. So for you personally, how do you measure success in terms of what you're doing?
It's a great question. It's the golden question, really. Again, I think it's just changed so much over the 7 years, but now I think it's feeling like I've done the best I can. So my idea of success is in an audition situation, doing as much preparation as possible and giving an interesting contribution and forgetting about it. That is literally kind of my idea of success, because there are so many other factors out of your control. And so very often we can kind of internalize the experience and feel maybe responsible for not getting an opportunity when, as I say, there's so many different factors going on. So I feel successful when I feel prepared and engaged. And if I am lucky enough to be working on a project, I try and think of one project at a time. I do know it's very common for actors to be 3 weeks from finishing a job and already their mind is in the future, panicking about trying to like another piece of work. So I think success is really staying in the project that you're in, giving it absolutely everything you've got. And, you know, like my family love them as I do. When I first was on television, they were like, he's arrived, he's made it. But I'd actually worked on bigger jobs in bigger theatres like 5 years ago. So with television, you're sort of exposed to more people. So there is an assumption that you are therefore, you have arrived or you are successful because of the amount of people that see you. And I think that's a very strange way of measuring success. So if you're working in a tiny little theatre, but you love it and you know you're putting in a really cracking performance and you've been, I don't know, like very well received, then for me, that's success.
Yeah, I suppose that is what in part defines a kind of creative person, because actually it's about that kind of creative fulfillment, and that might be very different from something which is measurable by, you know, how much money you're earning, or you know, other kind of measures that people might have of success.
Precisely. I think you've just hit the nail on the head with that. It's the same sort of principle as like an artist doesn't paint to ultimately make sure that their work is in the Saatchi Gallery or the National Portrait Gallery. They paint because they have to paint and because they are a painter and their work is a sort of extension of themselves. So I think if you're entering a career with a sort of final destination of like, I will be happy or I will be successful or I will be commercially viable when I reach Hollywood, then you might get to Hollywood and then find that you're in a bigger pond and then you're just always chasing. So I really, anyone that ever asks me, I always try and get them to sort of not minimize their aspirations, but just try and keep them in check.
So we've talked about measures of success, but we haven't really talked about you know, your success and what you've done. Obviously you've done a whole variety of things. Would you like to just tell us about, you know, what for you are the things that you are most proud of that you've done?
Yeah, so I suppose one of the things I'm most proud of is that I think it was a month before I actually graduated from drama school in London, I was cast in a co-production with the Royal National Theatre and an immersive theatre company called Punch Drunk. And they were putting on a play called The Drowned Man. And it was 650 audience members a night, going through this huge abandoned postal office in Paddington, which was the most incredible set. And audience are sort of filtered into the building, 650 a night. And on, I think, 4 or 5 levels, this play sort of unfolds. And I think the entire space was the size of a football pitch or something. It was huge, like really quite big. And you know, I was doing 8 shows a week, and the show is 3 hours long with no interval at all, even for the audience. I mean, there are toilets available in the performance space for the audience, but you know, if you're a performer, you're on for 3 hours straight. It was sort of like an adult choose your own adventure, is how I would describe it. They're like incredible production values. I've never seen such detail. You could wander around an abandoned Western town, rifling through drawers and pick up a letter, handwritten letter. Or a phone would ring and an audience member could pick up the phone and have a conversation with an actor who was somewhere else in the building. So, you know, that really blew my mind and was a bit of a baptism by fire. And one of the things about working for Punch Drunk as a company is that very often you will get to create your own character and write it with the company. And that's very unique. That doesn't happen a lot, that kind of, you know, devising at that stage. So to do that for my first job was just such a privilege. And I think I was the second youngest member of the company. So I was working with people who were older than me, who had worked for the company before. So I really learned a lot about how to be an actor and how to present myself and be professional. So that's probably one of them. And, you know, done lots of interesting things since then. Mainly worked in the theatre. I did a really beautiful play about the Israel and Palestine conflict, which was such an education for me, and it was a very research heavy play. It was written by an Irish Palestinian playwright, and we had, you know, Israeli speakers come in and talk to us as well. So, you know, that's what's cool about being an actor. Like for that period of time, a couple of months at the Arcola in London, I was sort of I was being a historian and, you know, delving into that sort of the political world of things, which I hadn't before. And then, you know, straight after that, I went and did a musical. I did the sequel to Rocky Horror, and suddenly that's like a completely different mad world. So there's lots of things I feel proud about, and interestingly, they're not necessarily the biggest productions. Like I've very lucky to work at the National Theatre on 3 projects with them, but sometimes it's the smaller ones, you know, or like last week I did a beautiful play reading. A friend of mine has written like a Jacobean tragic comedy about James I, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll give it a read, thanks for asking me, it's really nice. And it's just so good. And we had 4 actors on a Zoom call reading this play, and they're pitching it to theatres this year. And you know, that's the stuff I love as well. It's like when
it's exciting.
You've got the seeds of an idea. So I won't list my CV to you, but I think if I'm honest, it's usually theatre that is kind of in my blood.
Talk to us a little bit about your TV work though, because you have done some kind of quite high profile TV work as well, haven't you?
Yeah, so I did. I was cast in The Windsors for Channel 4, which is just like a hilarious romp of a comedy about the British royal family. And I was cast as Princess Beatrice's fiance and now husband, I think, in real life, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi. And that was just a riot, like probably the nicest cast that I've worked with. And just everyone was just really daft and silly in the best way possible. It was a very playful set, and Amanda Blue, who was our director, fully encouraged us just to kind of run wild on set and just try stuff. So, you know, that's one of those jobs where you're like, okay, I'm working for Channel 4 on this cool TV show, but I feel like I'm just back in play school, like charging around with a bunch of adults. And so getting back to that sense of play is like so nice. It's such a joy. So I enjoyed that.
That's really interesting, because I did wonder if the TV world would be a lot more prescriptive and, you know, a lot more serious, because you're kind of, you know, you've got time scales in which things need to be delivered by. And
I think it is. I think you're right, actually. It is. This was just quite a unique set, I think. And because of the nature of the show, you know, it's quite farcical. I think they need to allow us to kind of run riot a little bit. But largely, television and film is a lot more structured, and, you know, stand on that spot and like hit your light, hit your mark. And it's quite difficult sometimes, because in a theatre, like if you're in a show, I don't know, the National, for example, you've got like 2,000 people watching, and you're on, and you get one take, and that is it. So there's a lot of pressure, but also there's a lot of atmosphere. It kind of crackles. Whereas television, you know, you'll be halfway through a line, you think you're doing a great take, and then they'll shout cut, and you have to kind of reset. The makeup artist comes and like powders your face, or you might have to have like a costume assistant will fiddle with your collar, and then you'll maybe do another 7 takes. So it's a lot more kind of stop and start. But you know, again, I do love it because it's so much more, I think, detailed. Like you have to be smaller on television, on screen. You know, they say do less. That's the thing that you kind of hear with television. Is always try and do less. Whereas in a theatre, if you're playing to a lot of people, you move first and foremost with your body. You have to be a lot more physically expressive. That just doesn't work on television and film. You're in this shot. Yeah. Usually you're kind of here. So it's a very different discipline. And some actors hate it because, you know, it's a lot of waiting around and, you know, they just want to kind of get going. So.
Well, that's interesting because I was just thinking, it sounds like so interesting. It must never be boring. But can TV work be a little bit boring if you're kind of sitting around waiting for?
Yeah, I mean, the thing, like when I did my first TV job, I remember being led to my trailer and thinking, what, this is crazy. I have a trailer. Like, I have arrived, all of that rubbish, you know. Yeah. And then I was in that trailer for like 5 more hours because they were running behind schedule, and that, you know, the glamour of the trailer starts to wear off pretty quickly. But I'm a bit of a bookworm, so I just took my book and kind of dived in and, you know, had a little look over the script and stuff. But you definitely do a lot more waiting around in TV and film. I mean, you have times that you're called to the set, but something always not goes wrong, but they tend to be running behind a little bit. And so you got to be quite patient. I suppose in theatre, you kind of, what do people do? They kind of go off for a cup of tea or go off for lunch, and you're just told to come back in an hour. It's a bit more relaxed. But you're completely right when you say that television and film is time is money. That's it, really.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Talking about time, we've got about 10 minutes left. So I just quickly wanted to ask you a couple of questions before we open it out to see if there are any other questions. Sure. So just really thinking about where sort of young people are, people who are at school and college. Have you got any specific advice for people looking to study drama or performing arts at university, and then also about drama school as well, because you mentioned that you went to drama school? So
yeah, so what I would say is, what would I say? You know, you really have to thoroughly comb through the prospectus for like the university or wherever you want, or even the drama school that you want to go to. You have to really look through module by module, term by term, really get to know it. Don't be afraid to email and pester people by asking questions. You've just got to be thorough. Definitely talk to your parents as well, like try and give them a heads up on like why you want to do this and what your kind of ideas are. But, you know, again, I didn't do the traditional route. I didn't go straight to drama school. So if you feel like you might prefer a university experience, then absolutely go for that as well. I mean, drama school, when I was, you know, when I would have been auditioning, I would have been 18. I wasn't ready to be doing it there. And there's no shame in that. And if you try and you don't get in, I know people who've auditioned 7 times for drama school, so you just must not take that personally. Every year they're looking to create a company essentially, and so you don't get too many of the people in your class that are like you. They're really trying to kind of curate a year. So, you know, you could audition the year after and get in straight away. It's really important not to give up if that's what you want to do. And in terms of university as well, looking to find somewhere with some great theatre societies, I think is the way to do it. You know, some places will obviously teach you television and film acting, but it usually starts in theatre, and university plays is what really sort of kick-started my career. You know, I think I did about 18 or so, like when I was at university in Cambridge. I was doing so much, and that just got me really used to working with text and like having the confidence to do it. So that would be my advice if you're looking to go in for it.
So I'm just interested in terms of, because obviously one of the benefits of university is that you have a degree.
Yeah.
You know, aside from all the things that you mentioned earlier about kind of meeting lots of people, kind of developing that sort of sense of, you know, emotional intelligence, we would sort of say, in terms of how people are different and different backgrounds that they come from. You do actually leave with a degree. So, for example, you mentioned you were a teaching assistant, but if you wanted to branch off into teaching, that's something that you can do with a degree. I'm just interested in terms of drama school. Were the people at drama school from all different walks of life as well? So would you gain that sort of experience at drama school? I'm just trying to understand, for people who are thinking, maybe I'll go straight to drama school, or maybe I'll go to university first and then think about drama school. How do the two compare?
I mean, I think a good thing to do is, if you're not sure, is to apply for both. You'll very quickly be able to assess which environment feels right for you. All I would say is, with drama schools, they vary so greatly. I knew that coming from ARU, which was such like a wonderful earthy place, just like real people. I had a great 3 years. It wasn't pretentious at all. I wanted to mirror that experience at drama school. And some drama schools, have royal crests and like huge buildings and like glittering alumni and stuff, and that could be very intimidating. So I went to a brilliant school, but their ethos is very much like, no one is better than anyone, and we work really hard here. It's got a reputation for being a very strict and disciplined school, and I thought, that's what I need. And I went to other schools and got places at other schools, and they were lovely, but maybe a little grand, or I had to also choose where I could find a scholarship because I wasn't in a financial position. So definitely investigate into funding options, scholarships or grants or awards. But yeah, go to as many universities and drama schools as you can. And I used to take a little notebook around, and I had like a criteria list, and one of them was like vibe, like, do I like the vibe of the place?
I think that's really important. Yeah.
Like staff, like what were the staff like? Were they like engaging? Or like the local area, like where you go to university really matters. We're so lucky in the Cambridge campus, at least. I've never been to the Chelmsford campus, but I had Cambridge. Cambridge is an amazing place to live for 3 years. So like that's can be a bit of a deal breaker when looking into where you're going to go.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you said about things like attending open days. And I do think the vibe or the feeling is really important, because at the end of the day, at university, you're going to spend 3 years there. And I think it's really important that you feel that it's the right place for you and somewhere that you can be at home and you can connect with the people around you. And then just that in itself, I think, create so much kind of support and sort of well-being for you that you can succeed whatever it is that you're doing. Whereas I think if you perhaps go somewhere that isn't quite right for you and you think you should go there for whatever reason, you might find that it's not quite the right place. So I think that's really important that you do kind of go and visit places.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. If anyone has got any questions for Mateo, if there's anything that we haven't covered that you're interested in, you can either type in the chat, or you're very welcome to unmic, or you're very welcome to put your cameras on and a mic. And as I say, we won't record this bit, or we'll edit it out at the end. So please do feel free to ask any questions.
Oh, I can see there's one in the chat. Shall I answer that one?
From Megan, yes. What was your first audition like after drama school?
Really exciting. So as I say, it was for that immersive production.
Oh, you got the first audition that you auditioned for?
Yeah, which is that doesn't happen a lot. So I don't pretend that that's normal. But yeah, I had to prepare a song. So I sang a little bit from a film called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? There's this bit where there are these 3 washerwomen at the river, and there's this beautiful kind of like hymn, kind of like folk song. I sang a bit of that, and then I had to do an improvised scene in an American accent, because all of the accents in the show were American. And then I had to work with other actors, and I think there were 50 people over a weekend that were auditioned for one role. I mean, that's a lot for one role. Again, that's not typical, but it was a very specific skill set. But yeah, I just stayed away from coffee, got a lot of sleep, drank a lot of water. That was my first experience. Yeah.
Is that normal that you would audition as part of a group? Is that something that they look for, how you connect with other actors, or?
That, like, sometimes, I mean, it's quite common for drama school, you will do group auditions, but yeah, in a normal audition scenario, it would usually be you and the casting director. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but if you can conquer that and learn how to just continue to be playful in a group scenario, then just one-on-one will be a breeze.
Megan and Luna, have you got anything else that you'd like to ask Mateo? I have one more question for you.
Sure.
How important do you think it is to live in London or another major city?
Oh, such an interesting question, because I've actually been considering whether I would move out of London recently. You know, I love it here. My paternal grandparents are Londoners, so I feel like here is, although I'm from Norfolk, you know, I have a connection here. But I don't know, it's changing now. I have a friend who is actually the head of casting at the Globe Theatre, who says it doesn't matter anymore. Like, she would never turn someone down for a job because they lived in Liverpool as opposed to London. Some projects filming in London, it's easier after getting home from set, or like, you know, after, if a show finishes at 10:30 at night, it's easy to get home from. But I think it's expanding now, and there's so many great cities. You know, you've got Birmingham Rep, you've got Liverpool Everyman, Royal Exchange in Manchester, Bristol Old Vic, Norwich Theatre Royal, Nottingham Playhouse. The list goes on. So do not worry about living in London if you feel that it's not your vibe or it's too expensive. I would hate to think that anyone gives up on acting or doesn't pursue it because they think you have to be in the capital, because I actually don't believe you have to nowadays.
Okay, great. So another question from Megan. What was drama school like, and did you do anything alongside your course?
Drama school was really tough. I did a postgraduate, so I did a master's 1 year, super intensive. It was a ton of work. I didn't do much else outside of it because I just had to completely focus on getting the course done and getting through. You know, it's a very vulnerable thing. Like, you meet, or I met 29 new people, and trying to kind of like figure out those social dynamics, but you learn accents, and you're doing plays, and you're also learning the business of the industry as well. It was a wonderful time. I basically got to know myself throughout that. You know, you continue to grow up really at drama school, and it's all about not feeling embarrassed when you're kind of speaking or performing, and letting all of those insecurities just kind of, or turning the dial down on them a little bit. But yeah, drama school was like, yeah, time of my life.
Yeah, intense though, I guess, because you would have been doing a master's degree, and perhaps it'd be slightly different at undergraduate level.
You've got 3 years at undergraduate to kind of like sort of ease into things, and it is also kind of your university experience. They do have clubs and societies themselves, but you know, after I'd graduated, I knew that I needed to get cracking, and I actually couldn't afford to do a 3-year course afterwards either. So I was a little bit limited in terms of choice, but very fortunately I got a scholarship, and because of that scholarship, I suppose I worked really hard because I just felt so grateful for it.
Great. Just one last minute for any questions, because we started a bit late. So Luna or Megan, if you've got anything else that you'd like to ask. Great. Well, I will say thank you very much, Mateo. I thought that was really, really interesting. Really enjoyed speaking to you, and thanks for coming along and supporting our event.
Our pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. Nice to chat to you.